Journey on, the magic lies within the trails we ride.
So before you guys start working with your horses, I want you to understand a bit about their nervous system states. Almost every training issue that people struggle with come from the horse being in the wrong nervous system state. So we really need to understand this. You know, all the attunement and connection that we do is about getting the horse into the right nervous system state so you don't have those other problems. So in talking about nervous system states, I want to talk to you about, think about brake systems and gas pedal systems. You know, think about your car. Your car has a gas pedal that speeds it up. It has a brake that slows it down or brings it to a stop. And it has a parking brake or an emergency brake. And that parking brake is meant to be applied when you're already stopped to keep the car stopped. But very, very rarely, but like most people go through their life never actually doing this, you can jerk that parking brake on really hard in an emergency. And so our nervous systems are the same. And I became aware of this stuff studying something called polyvagal theory. And it basically says there's two types of brakes in your nervous system. One that slows you down, and that's the social connection brake. This one slows things down, keeps things calm. The other one is it's like the emergency brake or the parking brake in your car. The other one is about stillness, and it's also about freeze response. And we'll talk about freeze responses in a minute. And so if you think about, let's say you've got a diagram that's a triangle. At the top is what they call the ventral vagal, which is basically your foot brake, the thing that slows things down. Over on one side in the bottom corner, you've got the sympathetic nervous system. That's your gas pedal, that's your speed up thing. And then on the other side, you've got what's known as dorsal vagal, or freeze or shutdown. So if you go halfway between the two states on the right side, so the ventral vagal and the dorsal vagal, halfway through that is stillness. And when you get to the standing still and present flow chart, that's the state we'd like our horse to be in. He's standing still, but he's standing still because he's connected. Okay, he's standing still because he's relaxed. When we start working with our horse, we'd like him on the other side of that, which is halfway between activated or energetic. That's that sympathetic nervous system. That's the gas pedal. Halfway between that and the top. So if you think about, you're riding a horse, you're cantering along, and he's just cantering along nice and relaxed. So he's got quite a bit of energy. He's got the gas pedals going, but he's relaxed. And so that comes from that social engagement thing. So that's in the middle right there. And that's where we'd really like to have our horses when we're asking them to do things. So when they're doing things, we'd like to go from that state. And when they come to a stop, we'd like them to be in that other state over there. Other different states they can be in is if you go way down to the bottom there. If a horse is in just the bottom left-hand corner there, that sympathetic state, they're probably bolting. They're running, they're full on running, and they're not thinking of stopping. If you go all the way across to the right side in that dorsal vagal thing, that is shut down. That is a frozen horse. And really what a horse is doing when he's frozen, he's basically running away, but he's running away internally. I would say most well-trained horses you see are about halfway across there. So a lot of horse training is about, a lot of training that involves a lot of obedience is about getting a horse to do what you want, but they're not in that relaxed nervous system state. They're kind of in a bit of frozen nervous system state. So if say your horse is halfway across the bottom right there, okay, he might be, he's not completely anxious and running around, but you might find he's a bit stiff, because when horses go into freeze mode, they tighten up. And so, horses that operate pretty well but could be a bit stiff, probably in the middle there. Horses that are a bit, quite anxious, they bolt, they spook, they do all sorts of those sorts of things, they probably operate a bit more towards the left-hand side there. And then horses that are, say, shut down-ish, levels of shutdown are probably from the middle over to the right-hand side there. And so let's say you've got a horse that doesn't have a lot of go, okay? You've got to be able to figure out, and we'll learn this through the whole process, but you've got to be able to figure out, is he relaxed and just doesn't have a lot of gas pedal, doesn't have a lot of activation, so he's up in that top lefty bit there, or he might be down that bottom right-hand corner there. He might be slightly along from that shutdown state. And so one of them could be a horse just energy conserving and not terribly responsive to what you're asking, but the other one might be frozen and shut down and not able to respond to what you're asking. So it's really important that you understand these nervous system states. And usually if a horse is in one of those two bottom ones, you want to try to get him diagonally into the other one. So a horse that's completely activated, is really wound up, you'd like to get them to stillness. You'd like to get them to relaxation and stillness halfway across that other side there. If your horse who's in the shutdown mode, you'd like to get him across the other side there to where he is able to access energy and he's relaxed. If he's at the top one right there, then it's time to actually, that's a good place to start from, and you can go either way. You can be in stillness or you can be activated or energetic. But that, almost like the top half of that diagram is really where we'd like to keep our horses operating. And so what we're going to do in these next few videos is show you how to go about doing that.